how long have you been working with clients in Eugene?
I started as an attorney working in Portland at one of the nonprofits, Immigration Counseling Service, and after my time in Portland, I moved to Eugene and have been in the community, for about 10 years now, working with community members here statewide, but with a focus on helping individuals who are in Eugene or in more rural areas of Oregon.
Okay, so how do you feel like your work has changed in the past year, 2 years?
Well, work has changed quite a bit with the new administration. Since January, the Trump administration has taken a very adversarial stance against asylum seekers, and I work with a number of asylum seekers, people who are using their rights under the U.S. immigration laws to seek protection so that they do not have to return to situations of violence and persecution in their home countries. So we've seen more separations of families as the Trump administration has gone after asylum seekers. This administration is detaining and deporting people as a priority, and in doing so, they're violating the rule of law and the due process rights that other administrations have respected and facilitated.
And what are they usually seeking asylum for?
Violence. I myself work with a lot of asylum seekers coming from Central America and South America. And the stories that I hear from families of the violence that they've seen in their neighborhoods, in their communities, is really, it's shocking to me. And I've heard a lot of stories. The violence is just prolific and it's very, very serious. The people that I meet with largely tell me just uncontrolled, people acting, narco traffickers, gangs, but other private individuals, governments themselves at times, who are just emboldened with absolute impunity to commit murders, kidnappings, assaults, other reasons besides violence and the threat of violence. I think that the degradation of economic systems and certainly political reasons of political, governments in those regions acting against their own citizens. So political oppression, violence, poverty, and certainly also those intertwined with natural disasters and climate change related events.
Yeah. So what's your understanding of your legal rights and responsibilities when someone is detained, when one of your clients is detained by an ICE agent?
Well, I believe very strongly that U.S. laws provide for access to counsel in all arenas of immigration. Immigration laws affect people's liberty, affects people's movement, affects their access to their family, their ability to work. And when those big decisions are being made about their life, about their welfare, and about their unity with their family, they need access to counsel, and that's inherent in our judicial system as part of our due process, is right to counsel, right to legal services, legal help for systems that are often, big decisions are happening behind closed doors. Things happen, in legal arenas that are really difficult to understand and difficult to navigate without an attorney. And unfortunately, in Eugene, currently, our local ICE office is excluding attorneys just unilaterally. We're not allowed to accompany our clients for routine appointments. We're not allowed to accompany our clients for routine appointments, but also if somebody is being taken into custody at the local ICE office, they are not allowing attorneys or advocates to go in and give them an orientation as to their rights or what to expect. People are being shut out of helping people in that moment of detention, which is often coming as a surprise to the individuals who are being detained because they've been attending their appointments routinely for sometimes years, complying with all that's been asked of them, both by ICE and also of the immigration courts and the immigration system generally, and they're exercising their rights under U.S. laws, rights that the U.S. has respected for for generations, rights that, came into being after World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust. The United States and other countries came together to try to ensure that the doors are never slammed shut again for people who are fleeing and really need protection from a third country. And those laws are written into our US laws, and individuals who are trying to access them need representation. It's a process that happens in English, that happens, you have to do legal paperwork and file it appropriately, or else you won't be successful in that process. And so shutting out attorneys is basically setting people up for failure. And that's allowing ICE and the administration to then deport more people, because by shutting out attorneys, people just are not adequately competent. Not adequately competent maybe is not the way to say it. It's very difficult to do the process correctly in the way that it needs to be done to meet the legal standards that the administration has. And so by excluding attorneys who can help people do that process in the way that it needs to be done, these asylum seekers are being set up to fail, and then are at larger risk for being either detained during their process and or quickly deported by the administration.
So do you feel like certain laws and rights are being broken with the denial of access to their attorneys?
Yes, I think that the Administrative Procedures Act, which governs agencies, and it indicates that people need to have access to counsel when an investigative interview or kind of formal interviews are happening between agencies and people. And so I believe that law is being violated, and other constitutional protections around access to counsel, and just generally protections for due process of making sure that the rule of law is respected, and that people have a meaningful chance to exercise their rights under the law. And when having a meaningful chance means having an attorney, because the system is so complicated that it's impossible for somebody to do it on their own, especially while detained with limited access to phones, limited access to legal resources. Meaningful access means having an attorney with you, especially in those key moments before ICE. And I believe during all moments that somebody is called in to speak to the Department of Homeland Security, when their future, of where they can live and where they can be, and whether they're free from custody or not is in question, they need an attorney with them, and that's a right protected by law.
So what recourse do any of your clients have, or do you have, to ensure that the law is followed or that the situation is rectified?
We are certainly speaking with lawmakers to ask for their help, and we're working with the supervisors at ICE to try to understand what the future holds with this issue. But we're in a moment where the community is not going to stand by and be silent. And the community is really concerned, and is I would say, taking a stance that they're not going to turn their backs on our community members who are seeking asylum and who are trying to navigate the U.S. immigration laws to the best of their ability and showing up and doing everything right. And so community members are showing up and speaking out against the current practices of this administration. And so I think that there's both community level activism and outreach going on, and also attorneys are working to build access or recuperate access, both for individual clients but also for Oregonians as a whole.
What difference do you think that community activism will make in sort of the material reality for people that are being detained at the federal buildings in Eugene?
Well, I think that one, just giving acknowledgement to what is happening, that is an unjust, an unjust exercise of power by the Department of Homeland Security to truncate these people's ability to apply for asylum and seek safety for themselves in the United States. Not turning communities back on it, just not as a community, both in Eugene and more broadly in Oregon, saying that we are going to speak out about that. I think it matters to immigrants generally because our communities are living, and a lot of communities are living in fear right now. Gotten the message loud and clear from the federal government that immigrants of all types are not welcome, and that's not an Oregonian value. Oregon has always been a place that welcomes newcomers, that welcomes people seeking protection and helps them build a new life in the United States. And so in showing up, in different capacities, community members are standing up for our Oregonian values and standing up for their neighbors. And I think that means a lot to the people who are actually confronting this vulnerability and this stress in their lives right now. And hopefully, we are living in a democracy, and voicing our opinions as a people is crucial to making change and to making sure that both the government, but then also our community members understand when there's a disjunction between the actions of the government and our values locally.
And are you hearing about fear throughout our community and worry about going outside in public, going to their jobs or going to the check-in offices
Absolutely. Yes. No, I'm hearing from clients fear, and clients of all different backgrounds, even clients born in the United States, clients who are married to people who are born abroad but maybe lawful permanent residents now. There's a really high level of strain and stress in our community, strain and stress of advocates who are just upset to see the federal government treating our neighbors in this way. Yeah, I would say the fear, I think the fear is affecting people going out and in the community and engaging in their regular activities, or at least, and when they are doing so doing it with a heightened level of precarity and uncertainty and a sense of lack of belonging. I think that our economy is being strained, both by workers being spontaneously taken out of the workforce when they're detained, but families being separated, people needing to take more time off of work to attend last-minute appointments. I was at the ICE building this morning with an individual who had missed a phone call yesterday from somebody in the Department of Homeland Security system, and so he was called last minute to an appointment this morning at 9 a.m. And he wasn't the only one there who had been called for a last-minute appointment at 9 a.m. And imagine missing work spontaneously from one day to the next. That's something that most of us can't do.
So he was called for a check-in appointment spontaneously at 9 a.m.? He
was called yesterday.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yesterday he was told that he needed to come to the ICE building today at 9 a.m., yesterday afternoon.
And so what directive was he, did they say why?
Because he had missed a phone call.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was detained at the office?
He was not detained at the office.
Oh, okay.
No, he had to go, and then he had a meeting that I was excluded from. I was not allowed to go in and be there with him by his side when he was basically given a talking to for not picking up phone calls yesterday. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So he was given a talking to by federal agents for not answering a phone call.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and implied that if it happens again, it could result in his custody.
Wow. Okay. How did he feel about that?
He felt really upset. Mm-hmm. He felt angry. He's given no reason for them to not trust him. He has been showing up to all his appointments, doing everything right. He has an attorney registered fighting his asylum case with the immigration court. Mm-hmm. He has been routinely complying by phone, by in-person appointments, by going to court hearings for the last 4 years.
And he's been in the United States for 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like intimidation, harassment.
Yeah, that's how I perceived it as well. It seemed harassing and threatening.
Wow. That's super disappointing.
And that I was excluded from that appointment, even though I'm registered as his attorney for all of his process. And I had contacted the local ICE office yesterday to say that we were aware of the appointment, that he was regretful that he had missed the phone calls, and that I would be coming with him to represent him on his behalf. I was made to wait outside of the federal building, and I was not allowed to even go through security to be with him in a waiting room.
So how frustrating is it for you personally not having access to your clients and watching them go through these threatening situations, basically?
In 15 years of being an immigration attorney, over and over again, I've seen just how much difference it makes to have an attorney, to have a legal representative to help people not negotiate, but to communicate within the bounds of their rights to the government authorities in immigration cases. And to have moments where ICE is detaining people and either taking them to Tacoma or quickly deporting them, and to be excluded from the moment when that might happen to one of my clients it's such a violation of due process and such a disrespectful way to treat Oregonians. I feel personally very frustrated, but more so frustrated on behalf of my clients that they're put in that position and treated that way.
Okay, so when we reached out to ICE, they did send us a statement sort of attempting to explain their conduct in Eugene. And so one reason that they gave us was that anyone that's entered the United States, I think it was within the last couple of years, is subject to expedited removal. And that anyone that has a valid fear claim will be, their fear claim will be considered. If it's not valid, that they'll be quickly deported. And that ICE is now following the law. They said that Biden's administration was not following the law when it came to expedited removals. And so I'm assuming that this is sort of why this is an explanation for the quickness and conduct. What's your response to that?
I agree that is what they are doing. They are using a long dormant provision of the law, or at least a long, not fully executed to its full extent section of the law that says that expedited removal can happen up to 2 years of somebody being in the United States, or there's a little bit of different interpretations on the 2-year calculus. But the problem is that they're doing it to people they are doing, as in they are trying to quickly deport people who have actually already voiced their fear. For example, there was a gentleman taken into custody last week in Eugene who had entered the country seeking asylum. He was clear about that when he was entering the country and had contact with authorities. They already decided, the Department of Homeland Security released him into the country to pursue his lawful right to asylum. And he'd filed his asylum claim already. It's pending before the immigration court in Portland. So he has been clear all along that he fears for his life, for very genuine and solid, verifiable reasons in his country. And he was picked up, he was taken into custody and arrested and sent out of state to a detention facility by the local ICE office for the reason of being in the country for less than 2 years. So if the ICE office says that they're not actually doing that to people who have voiced a fear of return, then this person's case flies in the face of that.
Yeah. How many people do you know so far that have been detained in Eugene or in Springfield? I'm not sure what your client range is.
Just yesterday, there were 4 to 5 people who were taken into custody that we're aware of. Last week, I think there were 3. And honestly, that's just a small fraction that I believe that we've seen, because people have been in sight or have heard of the detentions. So I don't know the full scope of it. And it's not just limited to ICE Eugene detaining and then transporting out of the state people who are local to Lane County. People have been coming from Albany, from Bend, from Medford, from Salem, Portland.
For their check-in appointments.
Yeah, they've been called to the Eugene office of ICE from out of the area and taken into custody.
Wow. Well, I did know that, but yeah. And so these are probably happening on a weekly basis, daily basis. What's your estimation?
Weekly basis since at least early June.
Okay. What was the ramp up like before that? Do you know?
Well, you know, as
when Trump entered office in January.
I would say, just like other areas, we've seen an increase in appointments, increase of people coming to Eugene for appointments. Starting in May, it started to be more people from outside of the area. But otherwise, just feeling the effects of his mass deportation messaging and his desire to, you know, spread fear in the immigration community, and his pressuring to have people self-deport, people who have been in the community for decades and have their families here.
Is there any sort of database to see how many people have been detained in Oregon, or do we not collect that data here?
I would say that we, as in Oregonians, don't collect that data, but the federal government must, right? And, you know, the ICE website does have they have a statistics page where they do, you know, publish information about numbers of deportations. And in some contexts, they do it based on by month. And I have not checked that site recently to see what kind of information they're currently publishing as far as numbers or origin of individuals.
Okay. I remember my question, and this is probably the last one, but ICE also mentioned in their statement to us that I think they said that their attempt to detain people at the offices is a way to sort of have the detainment not disrupt the larger community. So they kind of want to keep them under wraps so it isn't disruptive and causing alarm to the rest of the community like a public arrest would somewhere. So do you feel like that's a valid reason for why they are essentially requiring more people to come in for appointments in person and then detaining them? Yeah.
I think that, you know, some of the things to keep in mind are that these people have done these appointments previously without incident, and they're just doing their next appointment. And so I think that they're people who are in the system, but they're also the people in the system who are doing everything right. They're showing up for all of their appointments. They're already participating in a formal legal process that has rights and should also involve access to attorneys. And so it's unexpected community members, and then when they are there, the arrest is then taking place in an environment of completely limited rights. There's limited ability to call family members on the outside, limited ability even to like give your car keys to a neighbor to take those home so that your car isn't parked on the street in Eugene when you are now out of state and in custody. So I think, yeah, those are big concerns for me for calling people in. One is that it's the people that are doing everything right, showing up for their appointments in compliance, but also then by taking them in the ICE office, they're taking them into custody at a place that's a fortress of exclusion, that's not allowing legal advocates or advocates of any sort in to help those individuals voice their rights and exercise their rights under the law.
And what usually happens at a check-in appointment?
Usually it's just a quick appointment to make sure that the person is still living in Oregon, that their address hasn't changed. Basically that. It's kind of like I don't practice in the criminal justice world, but people who have probation, they just have kind of scheduled appointments to not kind of fall out of communication with the system generally, to show that they are in compliance, that they are present, that they haven't fled, they haven't absconded. So these check-in appointments have generally been just to check in. I am here, I am interested in pursuing my rights under the US immigration laws, I'm fighting my case, and my address has not changed. Here, my phone number is still here, you can contact me at any time. I am here, I am participating.
And how often do they usually take place?
It depends on the person. ICE sets those criteria, but some people have them as frequently as monthly, and those monthly reportings can often also be that they have to answer phone calls or do virtual appointments even between the in-person appointments. But people on different schedules, every month, every 3 months, every 6 months.
Okay. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you feel is important to include?
Yes. I think that people in the community who have appointments, either with the court or with ICE or other immigration cases that they're working on, I think that it's important to not let the fear tactics of the administration dissuade people from pursuing legal cases that they have every right to do. However, it's really important for families and individuals to seek representation, make a personal safety plan that takes into account their own factors instead of kind of universally thinking that one thing is right for everybody. That's not how it is right now. And luckily in Oregon, we have a universal representation program that helps individuals who may not otherwise be able to afford a private attorney to gain access to legal services. It's called Equity Corps of Oregon, ECHO, ECO. And it's an amazing resource in Oregon. And so nobody should be needing to make these decisions and figuring out what to do and how to do it by themselves. There's an attorney available.